I have never been one to believe in superstition or conspiracy theories, but everything changed the day I found myself on the list. It all started on a typical snowy December evening. I was at home, scrolling through social media, trying to kill time while I waited for a package to arrive. Like most of us, I had a habit of mindlessly scrolling, liking posts, and reading stuff I didn't really care about. One post in particular caught my eye though. It was a strange link from an old friend of mine who I hadn't heard from in years. The post was cryptic, something about the list that finds you and a warning to stay away from it. At first I thought it was just another joke, one of those viral hoaxes, but then curiosity got the best of me. The link led to a blank page, except for a single sentence written in bold, red letters: "You are now on the list, that's it." No explanation, no background, just those words. I laughed it off, telling myself it was some kind of prank, maybe a weird app or a game. I couldn't have been more wrong. The next day, things started to get strange. I woke up late, groggy from a restless night of weird dreams. It felt like someone had been watching me while I slept. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the usual stress from work. But then things took a darker turn. It started with small, unsettling things. I noticed that people seemed to be avoiding me: friends, co-workers, even random strangers. At first I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was just the cold weather, or the holiday rush that was making everyone irritable. But then I started hearing whispers. It was faint at first, like someone was talking just out of earshot. The whispers always seemed to fade when I tried to get closer, as if they were deliberately avoiding being heard. I didn't connect it to the list at first. It wasn't until the first incident happened that I started to realize something was wrong. I was leaving work late one night when I saw a man standing near the entrance of my building. He was dressed in black, his face hidden under a hood. He didn't seem to notice me at first, but then he looked up and locked eyes with me. His gaze was cold, calculating, and I swear I saw a flash of recognition in his eyes. He didn't say anything. He just stared. Then, as if he had a sudden thought, he quickly turned and walked away. The whole encounter left me shaken. I didn't know why, but I felt like he had been waiting for me. The next day was worse. I got a strange phone call from a blocked number. There was no voice on the other end, just heavy breathing, followed by a click and the call ending abruptly. I thought it was a prank, but it didn't sit right with me. It felt too real. The breathing was slow, deliberate, almost like someone was waiting for me to say something, but I didn't say anything. I just hung up. It didn't stop there, though. As the days passed, more things started to happen. I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, like there was always someone behind me, waiting for the right moment to strike. And then, the worst thing happened. I found out just how far the list went. I was at a family gathering when I heard my uncle whisper something to my dad. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught the tail end of it. "She's on the list. Isn't she?" My heart sank. I didn't know what they were talking about, but I knew it had to be related to that damn post. Later I confronted my uncle about it, but he played it off like he hadn't said anything. He told me I was being paranoid, that it was probably nothing, but the look in his eyes told me something was wrong. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment in my head. "She's on the list." I tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, that it meant nothing. But deep down I knew it wasn't. The list was real, and somehow I had become a part of it. I tried to search online for any information about it, but every time I searched I found nothing. It was as if the list didn't want to be found. It was like it only existed for the people who were on it, and once you were in, you couldn't get out. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, hearing things that weren't there. Shadows would flicker in the corners of my eyes, and whenever I turned to look, they would vanish. People I knew seemed to disappear from my life one by one. Friends stopped calling, co-workers avoided me, and even my family seemed distant. It was like I was being erased from the world. I didn't know who to trust anymore. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The whispers, the man in black, the phone calls, it was all connected. The list wasn't just some prank. It was a curse, a force that sought out certain people like me, and pulled them into its grip. And once you were on it, there was no getting off. I tried to tell a few close friends about it, but no one believed me. They just laughed it off or told me I was overreacting. The more I tried to explain, the more isolated I felt. I had no proof, no way to show them that I wasn't crazy. But deep down I knew. I knew that something was coming, something I couldn't escape. A few days later I got another phone call, but this time it wasn't just breathing. A voice came through the line, but it wasn't human. It was distorted, static-filled, like a recording that had been scrambled. And then, through the noise, I heard the words, "We know where you are. We'll be watching." That was the moment I realized it wasn't just a list. It was a warning that if you didn't obey, if you didn't do what it wanted, there would be consequences. Deadly consequences. I had to figure out how to break free, how to escape this list before it was too late. But no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, it seemed like I was always being drawn back to it. The list found me, and now there was nowhere to hide. I've always been skeptical of things that seem too good to be true, or too strange to be real. That's probably why, when I came across a post online claiming to offer a naughty list that would predict your future and bring you face to face with your worst fears, I just rolled my eyes and kept scrolling. But little did I know, I was about to find myself in the middle of something that would make me question everything I thought I knew about the world. It all started on a regular Sunday afternoon. I was scrolling through my inbox when I saw a subject line that caught my attention. It read, "You've been added to the list, no name, no sender," just that sentence. For a moment I thought it was some weird spam, but then I clicked it, and the message inside was even more bizarre. The email was short, just a few lines. It said, "You've been placed on the list. This list finds those who are worthy of its attention. Be aware," that's all it said. No signature, no link, no instructions. Just a warning. I closed the email and laughed it off, thinking it was some kind of prank or a phishing attempt. I figured I would just delete it and move on. But something about it didn't sit right with me. I felt a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, like there was something I wasn't seeing. I brushed it off, though, and went on with my day. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a soft knock on my front door. It was late, almost midnight, so I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated for a moment, but I got up to check. When I opened the door, no one was there. But there was a small, sealed envelope lying on my doorstep. I don't know why, but I picked it up. The envelope was plain, with no address, no markings, just a piece of plain white paper. Inside I found a single sheet of paper, and on it was a list. My name was at the top, followed by a few others' names I didn't recognize. It wasn't a list of people I knew. It was a list of strangers, people I'd never heard of. But my name was at the top, and the words below it read, "The consequences are inevitable. You're being watched." I didn't know what to think. It felt like some twisted game, and at that moment I regretted even reading the email. But when I tried to throw the list away, it didn't feel like I was in control anymore. The list felt like it belonged to me, like it had been waiting for me to find it. And I knew deep down that something terrible was about to happen. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I couldn't explain it at first, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more unsettling it became. It started small. I'd see figures in my peripheral vision, fleeting shadows that disappeared as soon as I turned to look. At first I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, but then it kept happening. I'd be walking down the street, and I swear I'd see someone following me, just a glimpse of them, then they'd vanish. It was almost like they were deliberately staying out of sight, making sure I couldn't get a clear look. I felt like I was losing my mind, but every time I tried to explain it, people would brush it off. It's nothing, just stress, just exhaustion, that's what they said. But it didn't stop. In fact, it only got worse. One night I decided to try and burn the list. I thought maybe, just maybe, getting rid of it would put an end to everything. I lit a match and held it to the edge of the paper. But as the flames licked at the paper, something strange happened. The paper didn't burn the way it should have. It twisted and curled, but instead of turning to ash, it seemed to resist the fire. The list wouldn't go away. I stared at the paper, confused, and then right in front of me, my name started to change. The letters didn't stay still. They began to shift, rearranging themselves, as if something was trying to communicate through the list. I pulled my hand away from the flame, the paper falling from my fingers. It burned with an eerie light, but the fire didn't seem natural. It flickered in a way that made me feel cold all over, like something was watching, waiting. That's when I saw the consequences. The words on the paper changed again. This time they read, "You will pay the price for ignoring the warning." The list always finds its mark. I didn't know what that meant, but I couldn't deny that it felt real. It was like the universe was trying to warn me, to tell me something I couldn't escape. The next morning I woke up to a voice message on my phone. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but I listened to it anyway. The voice on the other end was distorted, like it was being filtered through static. The words were almost impossible to make out, but I could hear one thing clearly: "You're not alone." "We're watching." I froze, staring at the phone. My heart raced in my chest. I hadn't told anyone about the list, and I had never given out my phone number to anyone who might have been involved. So who was it? Who was watching me? That day, I tried to reach out to the people on the list. I looked up the names, trying to find any connection, any clue that would explain what was happening. But when I tried to contact them, they were all unreachable. Some of them didn't exist. Some had disappeared from the face of the earth. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. I was being hunted. The list had found me, and it wasn't going to stop until it had gotten what it wanted. It didn't matter where I went or what I did. Once your name was on the list, there was no escape. Now, I don't know how much time I have left. The shadows feel closer than ever. I don't know who or what is behind it, but I do know this: if you ever find yourself on the list, don't ignore it. Because once it finds you, there's no turning back, and it will always find you, no matter what. I didn't believe in things like fate or destiny. I always thought people who did were just making excuses when life didn't go the way they planned. I liked to think I had control over my own choices, my own future. But that all changed the day I found out about the list. It all started on a quiet Thursday. I had just finished a long day at work and was in the middle of going through my emails when I saw a strange message pop up in my inbox. No subject, just the sender's name, the keeper. It wasn't anyone I recognized, but for some reason my curiosity got the best of me. I opened it. The email itself was brief, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. It simply read, "Your name is on the list." It's time to remember I didn't know what to make of it at first. Who even sends an email like that? But something in the back of my mind made me uneasy. I shrugged it off, figuring it was some weird spam or joke, and went about my day. Later that evening, while I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone, I got another notification. A text message from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but then I had this strange feeling like I should. I checked it, and it was short, almost like the email, "Check your mailbox. You'll find what you've been waiting for." I thought it was a prank at first, just some weird joke. But when I went outside to check my mailbox, I saw it. A small envelope lying right there. No return address, no name. It wasn't anything official, but it was there, sitting like it was waiting for me. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It had a list written on it. The names weren't familiar to me, except for one. My name, right at the top. Bold black, like it had been stamped there. Beneath my name were several others I didn't recognize, but there was one thing that stood out. At the bottom, in smaller print, it said the list chooses and you're next. I froze. That was when I knew this wasn't some weird joke. This wasn't spam. I could feel my heart race. It had to be a prank, right? It had to be. But as I crumpled the paper in my hands, I felt this odd sensation, almost like the paper was holding me back, like it was calling me to keep it. I shoved it in my drawer, trying to forget about it, but I couldn't. The days that followed were a blur of confusion. The list kept replaying in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my name at the top. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't shake it. I told myself it was nothing. It had to be some elaborate prank. I just had to ignore it. But that night when I went to bed, I heard something. It was so faint, but it was there. A whispering sound. I couldn't make out the words, but it was like someone was calling my name from just outside my window. I froze listening, but there was nothing there. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just imagining it, but the feeling didn't go away. The next day, another name on the list disappeared. The news barely mentioned it. A person I didn't know found dead in their apartment, no details, just the fact that they were gone. I couldn't ignore it anymore. This was real. The list wasn't just a joke. It was something more. I tried to talk to my friend Sarah about it, but she wasn't convinced. I called her up, barely able to hide my panic. I don't know what's happening, I told her. But I got this email, then this letter with my name on it. Now people on the list are disappearing. I think I'm next. She laughed at first, saying I was overreacting. Maybe it's just some weird coincidence, or you're reading too much into it, she said. But deep down, I could tell she was worried too. Still, she couldn't bring herself to believe what I was saying. I didn't care about what she said. I knew something terrible was coming. I could feel it in my bones. Days went by, and the whispers continued. Late at night, I could hear faint noises, almost like someone was breathing just behind me. I'd turn around, but no one was there. And then it happened again. Another name on the list vanished. I didn't even know who they were, but it didn't matter. The feeling of dread, of being watched, was growing stronger. I couldn't escape it. I started researching the list, desperate for answers. There were no clues, no explanations. No one had ever heard of a list like this. It was like it appeared out of nowhere, and it was after me. The more I looked into it, the more I realized how little control I had. The list wasn't something I could escape. A few days later, I got another message, this time from an unlisted number. I almost didn't open it. I was too scared to, but the need to know was too strong. I opened the text, and it simply read, "You can't hide. The list is still with you. It's waiting." I felt a chill run down my spine. The list hadn't let me go. It was still out there somewhere, and it wasn't done with me. I didn't know what to do anymore. I couldn't stop it, couldn't hide from it. All I could do was wait. Wait for my name to be crossed off. Wait for the day when the list would finally come for me. And that's the worst part. The not knowing. The waiting. The feeling that something is always lurking, just out of sight, waiting to make its move. I can't outrun it. I can't hide from it. The list will find me. It always finds you. It was a few weeks ago when I first got the email. I was just finishing up my work day and was about to close my laptop when I saw a message from an unknown email address. The subject line just said, "The list, nothing more, nothing less." My first thought? Spam. But there was something about it that caught my attention, so I opened it. It was simple. Too simple. The email read, "Your name is on the list. You've been warned, nothing else. No sender name, no details. Just that cryptic message. I thought it was a joke. Probably a scam. But still, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something. I didn't mention it to anyone at first. I mean, who would believe something like that? It sounded insane. But every time I went to bed that night, the words kept ringing in my ears. "You've been warned." It felt like it was more than a warning, like it was a countdown. But I didn't know from what. A couple of days later, the first person on the list disappeared. I saw it on the news. A man, middle-aged, lived alone, no apparent reason for his death, just gone. It wasn't until I saw that news report that I realized what I was dealing with. I had seen his name before. He was on the list. I tried to ignore it, tried to move on with my life, but the weird feeling wouldn't leave me. That night, I started hearing sounds. Little noises like whispers, coming from the corners of my apartment. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and I swear I could hear something moving just outside my door. I called my best friend, Emma, and told her what was happening. I didn't expect her to believe me, but she didn't laugh it off. Instead, she seemed concerned. She said, "This sounds crazy, but do you think it's connected to the list?" I didn't know what to say. It felt too crazy to even mention, but somehow it felt like she was the only person who might understand. And that's when I realized I wasn't crazy. The list was real. It was after people, and it was coming for me. But here's the thing, I didn't know what to do about it. I couldn't fight it, couldn't run from it. All I could do was wait, watch as one person after another disappeared. Each name on the list was crossed off, and it felt like mine was next. Maybe it would find me when I least expected it. Maybe the list doesn't stop. Once you're on it, you're not getting off. It finds you. It always finds you. There was something.